Came across an article this past week on CNN's website titled, "Is the Internet Killing Religion?" Of course, I was immediately interested upon seeing that, so I began to read it. And I soon began thinking to myself, is this really the case? And if so, why is it happening, or how is it happening? Before we discuss anything, let's take a look at what the internet really is, because despite popular belief, the internet is more than just a means of killing time, reposting the latest vines, posting selfies, and Instagramming photos of your last trip to Starbucks. By definition, the internet is a global system of interconnected computer networks that use the standard internet protocol suite to link several billion devices worldwide. It is a network of networks that consists of millions of private, public, academic, business, and government networks. It is essentially computers communicating with each other, which is exactly what we built them to do. But I'm not going to go too much into that because you can teach numerous classes on the history and development of computers and the internet, so there's no need for me to go into too much depth here. Google it if you really want to know. What's most important here is what the internet is capable of doing, and the answer is it can do just about anything you need it to do. There are websites and applications for just about anything you need. Google, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Amazon, eBay, Yahoo, Pinterest, Yelp, Wikipedia, YouTube, Netflix, and even browsers for some of you out there. Whatever floats your boat. In my opinion, the internet is one of the most important developments in history right after the invention of the written language. Well, why is that? Because it allows us easy access to a world of information. We have access to books, articles, journals, videos, encyclopedias. We can connect with each other faster and easier than ever before in the history of the world. We can get up-to-the-minute news and updates from around the globe. You can talk to people you've never met, in parts of the world you've never been to, people thousands of miles away, and they're practically right there in the room with you. As a musician here in San Diego, I can write a song, put my guitar and bass parts onto it, then I can send those files over to my good friend in New York so he can put some keyboard parts onto it. From there he can send it to his singer so she can put her vocal tracks onto it, then I get it right back for editing and mixing. That's something that musicians decades ago probably would have never dreamed of, but I don't think I can survive without it as a musician now. The Bible, on the other hand, is an ancient book written by Bronze Age goat herders no sooner than a few decades after the events in the book supposedly took place. Oh yeah, those anonymous authors who wrote the book were not eyewitnesses to the events either. The book contains stories of magic and superstition, as well as promoting racism, rape, incest, misogyny, slavery, murder, genocide, and infanticide. It has also been verifiably altered, added to, and translated many times into many languages using copies of copies of copies with no original documents to be preserved or found. It is widely considered to be the ultimate moral compass for humanity to follow. Right. But ask yourself, how can the Bible be the infallible word of God when it has the word version printed right on the cover? Here's a fun fact for you. There are over 200 versions of the Bible, and that's only in English. But before I continue on with this rant, what does this have to do with the internet? Alan Downey, a computer scientist at Olin College of Engineering in Massachusetts, has been studying the rise in people claiming no religious affiliation for many years now. Since 1985, Downey has seen the number of first-year college students claiming no religious affiliation grow from 8% to 25%. This is according to the CIRP Freshman Survey. By the way, I'll have links to all articles and information in the description below. Downey also includes information and statistics from the General Social Survey, or GSS, that show the number of religiously unaffiliated people has risen from 8% to 18% between the years of 1990 and 2010. This coincides with information provided by the Pew Research Center reported in 2010 saying that 1 in 5 American adults and a third of those under 30 years of age are not affiliated with any religion. In his paper titled Religious Affiliation, Education, and Internet Use, which was published this past March, Downey analyzed data from the GSS and discovered a correlation between increased internet usage and religious disaffiliation. In 1990, adult internet usage was almost zero. 20 years later, that number was practically 80% in 2010. In that same 20-year period, he noticed a 25 million person spike in those who claimed no religious affiliation whatsoever. GSS numbers showed that people who use the internet a few hours a week were less likely to have any affiliation by about 2%. Those online more than 7 hours a week were 3% more likely not to have any religious affiliation. But it's incredibly important to point out that correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. Just because some findings may lead to a certain cause doesn't mean you've determined the exact cause, and researchers know that. That is one of the most beautiful things about the sciences, in my opinion. Somebody can make a discovery and immediately set out trying to disprove what they discovered just so they can know whether or not it was a fluke. Researchers can find a link between A and B, for example, but instead of saying we found that A causes B, they'll say something like, we see a trend of A leading to B, but we should probably run some more tests to be sure. Which is essentially the basis of the scientific method. That differs greatly from religion, however, who, probably say something like, oh my gosh, this illness has killed many. What have we done to anger God? Why have we incurred his wrath? Fortunately, Downey was able to control for factors including religious upbringing, education, rural and urban environments, income, and yet he was still able to find a link that allowed him to tentatively conclude that internet usage causes religious disaffiliation. Downey believes that decreases in religious upbringing have had the largest effect, accounting for 25% of reduced affiliation. College education covers about 5%, and internet use may account for another 20%. He attributes the remaining 50% to what he calls generational replacement, meaning those born more recently are less likely to be religiously affiliated, although he doesn't really offer an explanation as to why that is. Of course, there's a lot more research to be done, especially since Downey only looks at time spent online and not content. In all fairness, content may be a little harder to track for researchers. For all we know, people could be too busy playing Farmville and updating their Facebook statuses to bother going to church. So we cannot say for sure that the internet is directly responsible for the decline in religious believers, but it's safe to say it's certainly playing a role in the phenomenon. So in a nutshell, our friend Downey is saying that increased education and access to information are major reasons why religion is dying. Interesting. Back in the dark, depressing time of our history we call the Middle Ages, the great majority of the population was uneducated and illiterate. Only those who were wealthy, part of the church, or otherwise privileged people were able to read or write. The church was in charge, and they kept the masses ignorant and oppressed by keeping them dumb. This ensured that the fear of God was kept alive in them, allowing the church to do as they pleased. Scientists, philosophers, astronomers, free thinkers, and anybody else who dared question the Word of God was imprisoned. Or worse yet, they were executed just to make an example to the rest. There are close to 3,000 gods or deities written about since the start of recorded history. At one time, these gods were used as an explanation for natural occurrences we had no other explanation for because the technology of the time just didn't allow for it. The sun goes up and the sun goes down. That might be the work of the sun god pulling the sun on his chariot at the end of the day. What else could it be? We know now why the sun appears to rise and set every day.
Well, doesn't mean if you don't understand something and the community of physicists don't understand it, that means God did it? Is that how you want to play this game? Because if it is, here's a list of the things in the past that the physicists at the time didn't understand. And a talk show you might have conducted 200 years ago would have said, the planets do retrograde? Can't understand that, must be a God. And we'd say, you're right. And then 10 years later, we understand it, so what do you do? So if that's how you want to invoke your evidence for God, then God is an ever receding pocket of scientific ignorance that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller as time moves on. So just be ready for that to happen, if that's how you want to come at the problem.
Thanks, Neil. Science doesn't know everything, and that's okay. But just because you don't understand something doesn't mean you can fill it with any asinine and ridiculous explanation you see fit. It's 2014 and it's easier than ever before to gain access to knowledge and information. Is the internet really killing religion? Well, I think it very much has a great influence on the number of people losing interest and losing faith in religion. Hopefully those people move on to happier, more fulfilling lives for themselves, for their friends, and for their families, free from persecution, oppression, and fear of eternal damnation just for being themselves, just for being human. In this digital age of information, ignorance is a choice. We need more thinkers, more doers, more scientists, more engineers. We need all of society on the same page if we want to progress. Unfortunately, we are seeing many areas of the world going backwards. We need to educate and encourage younger generations. We need to instill that crucial sense of curiosity and discovery that could very well lead to new and incredible discoveries and innovations. It's time for people to grow up and leave their fairy tales behind and join us all in the 21st century. I urge everybody, especially young people, to question everything. It is not a crime to think. Well, not at least in this country. It's okay to question anything that doesn't make sense to you, and you absolutely should. Never cease in your inquiry for knowledge. Don't let anybody bully you or intimidate you for asking questions and wanting to know more. Don't ever apologize for being curious about how the world works. I think you owe it to yourself to think for yourself. If you want more information, there are tons of secular sites, groups, and forums you can check out. I urge you, if you haven't already, to look into the works of Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Christopher Hitchens, David McAfee, Greta Christina, all great authors. Their works are fantastic. I also urge you to check out two of my favorite sites here on YouTube. That's The Cult of Dusty and Jaclyn Glenn. I'm big fans of theirs and I love the work they do. So please, I have them in my featured sites. Check them out and thank you for watching.